She used to look at you with love and desire in her eyes, but that seemed like ages ago. Now, it's like this woman you love just doesn't want to be around you. And the harder you try, the more she just seems to slip away. Being discarded by someone you are in love with is the most horrible feeling in the world. This happens when the frame is lost. When the man loses frame and no longer leads the frame of the relationship, the woman finds herself having lost feelings for him. And in some ways, she can't even explain why. It's a sad way that relationships end. And this doesn't have to be you. In this part of the Frame series, we're going to talk about how frame is typically lost, so you can be aware and prevent yourself from losing the one that you love.
The times where she's not doing it naturally. Either the desire is not there, that could be part of it, or the social conditioning or her internal framework is so strongly pulling her in another way that it puts her in a conflict. A woman will fight against your frame ultimately when she doesn't trust you. She has to trust your leadership. She has to trust your abilities as a man, your value as a man, your overall value, your overall abilities, being a capable guy. She has to trust that you have the ability to lead and to solve the problems and to get you guys where you're going and to set up a relationship that's the kind that she would want to be in. If she doesn't trust that, then what she's going to do is she's going to step in and challenge your frame. What happens to a lot of guys is they lose the frame then. Because the guy, you have this desire for this woman. We have a natural tendency as men to want to please a woman. That sounds very not masculine or not alpha, but it is the truth. It's our genetic wiring. This is why guys get themselves in trouble. Where they're invested in a woman, they want to take care of her, make her happy. It's taking care of the baby maker. Genetically, evolutionarily speaking, if she was carrying your child, you would want to make sure she was taken care of. And that includes her emotional well-being, because that's going to make her a more stable person to be a support mechanism for you. And so we want her genuine desire and all that stuff, but we also want to care for her. That need that we have to care for her will cause us oftentimes and cause men to lose their own frame. So they leave the relationship, she challenges, he's looking at that input and saying, I want to make her happy. And so I'm going to do what she wants. And this is where she's the boss happens, right? This is where the wife runs the relationship, those sorts of things. When a guy does that, he loses trust.
I'm Paul, your relationship and performance psychology expert. Thanks for subscribing and enjoying the channel. Your support helps me get life-changing information out to more people, making their lives in the world just a little bit better. So don't forget to click the link in the video description to check out my podcast and sign up for my free newsletter.
She no longer trusts him as a leader in that relationship. And so what ends up happening is she starts to step more into a masculine framework, and she starts to then run the relationship. How do you not lose frame? You have a strong level of confidence and you have abilities. So you work on yourself, you work on your value, you work on your relationship game. What's game? It's being able to communicate with a woman in a way that gets her to want to follow your frame, because she desires you and she desires wanting to be with you and be into that image or picture of what life is supposed to be like and the life that you're building. She wants to be a part of that. She wants to complement your life and be there with you, and you're leading the charge. You have to have a very strong sense of self, a strong vision for your life, and you have to have the ability to get there. And so your job as a man is to work on those things so that the woman then trusts your leadership and framework. When she trusts your leadership and framework, a lot of her own ideas that she had before, she'll let those go to the wayside to follow you. She only had those ideas because she was on her own, in her own frame. She was navigating the world by herself with nobody to trust. And so she had different concepts of relationship structures, different concepts of how an argument should go. That's because she was in her own framework, her own conditioning experiences taught her that that's the way that she needed to be. When she's in your frame and submitted to you, she defers to your way of doing things and she abandons those other things. So frame is the key to long-term relationship success, That's where our genetic wiring is. When we oppose our genetic wiring too much, we end up unhappy because our brains tell us that this is not how things are supposed to be for us. When she's leading a relationship, she doesn't feel good. She feels like she's taking care of another kid. It puts her in a mental and emotional state of instability and unhappiness, and that will eventually destroy your relationships. When I say destroy, I mean we're talking divorce, we're talking breakups, but we're also talking more than that. We're talking even worse would be staying together but being miserable and being unhappy. They emasculate themselves, essentially. They get into a weaker and weaker framework. It just ends up being divisive. And you have to understand that in some ways, men and women are actually designed to come together divisively. We don't fit together in perfect harmony. That's actually a myth. And the reason why was because having a variety of partners that you had babies with made for more probability of having babies survive. For genetic diversity and survival, we're actually designed to discard each other and go to other mates. But that doesn't mean we can't have long-term success. Having long-term success, we're talking relationships that last past the 2-year mark, and that are not only lasting, but exceptionally happy. In order to have that, you as a man have to lead the relationship and have frame in the relationship. Now, final thoughts on this. Having frame in the relationship is leading. It's not being controlling. That's a whole different thing. And if you have to be controlling, you've probably lost frame. If she's following you and consenting to your leadership, you don't have to do a bunch of controlling behaviors to the point where some guys can even get verbally abusive to somebody. He's only being controlling because he's lost or he's losing the frame. In other words, she is out of the frame of the relationship, wanting to do her own thing and not be led. She's taking it past the point of challenging. And instead of persuading as best as he can to pull her back into frame using game, and then if she chooses not to, then letting her go, he instead essentially chases after her and tries to control her behavior. This can lead to really divisive, bad scenarios where abuse can happen on both sides. You don't want to do that. Control and leadership are not the same. So how do you do this without controlling? Your game and your understanding of women, understanding of emotion, or how to communicate on a seductive and emotional level to your woman. This starts from the moment you meet a girl and you're picking her up to getting into a relationship to long-lasting years and years later. The skill sets in the game does change along that line and that timeline. But it's those skill sets that are going to allow you to hold that frame and hold that leadership. Your inner game has to be in order first, because the first frame that you need to take care of is your own. And then when someone else enters your frame, you have the leadership in the frame of the relationship. And then she's submitting to that framework. When I say submitting, it's always consensual. You're not controlling her, you're not manipulating her. And that's another misconception. A lot of people who don't understand game, and a lot of women get nervous because they don't trust men about guys learning skills on how to better communicate with you and fulfill your needs. Well, that sounds better, right? Well, that's exactly what it is. That's what game is. It's learning those things, but it's all about persuasion. Persuasion is, I'm not going to try to control this person, but I'm going to communicate with them in such a way that they see my perspective and they want to follow that perspective. Whereas manipulation is where I'm presenting information in a way that I'm not exactly telling the truth, and I'm causing them to do things that they really don't want to do. Deception is where I might outright lie about things. So she always consents. You don't want to manipulate somebody into your frame. You don't want to get into that kind of stuff in gameplay. Your game has to be building genuine desire. When she has genuine, deep desire for you, wants to be with you, then she consents to your frame. If you're manipulating, you'll never know if she really desires you or not, and then that is a problem. So you never want to build a relationship based on manipulation, because you'll never know if she would choose you without that manipulation. So you have to give her the opportunity to pick you and to choose you. And that's where persuasion and leadership comes in. So that's what frame is about, and that's what you need in order to have any relationship last, and for you to be happy, and for her to be happy in those relationships.
Oh, this looks tough.
Yeah, the after workout cigar. It's all about health.